Good afternoon, everybody. This is Greg Byrne. I'm the Director of the Transaction Division in the Office of Recapitalization in HUD headquarters. We're going to today go through the changes to awardees and transaction processing as a result of the recently released RAD notice. So our colleague Will Levy last week or the week before did a webinar on the policy changes in the notice. What we're going to do now is what is the implications of that for anyone who has received a CHAP, and how does that change your life from the period in which you get a CHAP until the point in which you close? So that's what we're going to be talking about, is sort of at the transactional level, what difference does it mean and how you interact with the Office of Recap. With me here today is Robert Robinson, and from our Federal Practice Group, who's our sort of business support contractor, and we'll be tag teaming on this. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to go through some of the key changes. We've got a PowerPoint, by the way. The PowerPoint you can download right now if you want. It's shown up there on your screen, or you should be able to access it from the GoTo live meeting. But we'll go through the PowerPoint, all but the last couple slides, and then what we're going to do is we're going to flip over to the resource desk. And then Robert's actually going to give you a visual demonstration of some of the new changes in the resource desk that support these modifications in our transaction processing. So the first we're going to talk about is portfolio awards. Will went over this in his webinar a week or two back. The main thing I just want to say on this is to say we are no longer we'll have the multi-phase awards. They'll get rolled into the portfolio awards, and there's a new timing in terms of sort of how quickly you, as a PHA, if you have a portfolio award, how many deals you have to bring in every year in order to keep your portfolio alive. I won't go through the specifics of that. I do want to say is that the last couple bullets on this slide is that when it's all said and done, the Congress only gave us up until September 30th, 2024 to get applications in. So the very end date of any portfolio award will always be then. But also for active awardees, we are going to automatically roll over anybody who has a multi-phase award will become part of this new portfolio award structure. So the PHA doesn't have to contact your transaction manager, doesn't have to contact the resource desk. We will automatically treat it as part of a new portfolio award for the PHA. So you'll be getting notification from us through the resource desk. Okay, we'll go to the next slide, Robert. Second thing, CHAP Milestone. So we've tried to simplify the world of RAD transaction processing, and so there's now one global universal financing plan due date, and that's 270 days after issuance of the CHAP. And for the most part, we've learned that mostly no debt deals, but some handful of debt deals generally can pull that off within 9 months to get their financing plan submitted. We've certainly acknowledged that that's more challenging for tax credits. And in previous iterations of the notice, we've tried to do carve-outs. Well, if it's a 4% credit over this period of time, over 9% credit over this period of time. What we felt with this version of the notice that the best approach right now is to be more flexible, and particularly since we still have a large sort of cap space in terms of the Congress giving us 455,000 units to participate in the program, and with everything that we've closed and have in hand, we're at 280,000 or something. So we still got a ways to go. So we said we're just going to have one financing plan milestone, but if you need an extension, you will submit a request through the resource desk for an extension, and you will document why you need it. Why you might need it is you did the environmental review and the phase 1 came back, and suddenly you now have to do a phase 2, and it's going to take you more time, so you need some more time. Or your funding source, your main source of funding fell through, and you need to go back out and get either another lender or some other equity provider. Essentially what we're saying is, as long as you are actively working on your transaction, we are going to process your request. If you're just sitting on your hands and you're not really making an effort, or a PHA is not being responsive to us in terms of if we haven't heard from you in a while, or we reach out to you, then we'll take a harder look at any extension requests. But essentially, if you can document and just show us that there's a decent need, you're actively working on your transaction, then we're going to give you your extension. But the extensions will be, if they are less than 6 months, you do not need a resident comment or meeting. But anything that goes beyond 6 months, and every 6 months after that, that with your request you have to demonstrate that you've had a resident meeting, and that's part of the new notice. So we'll give you extensions, and but once it goes over 6 months, you have to show to us that you've had a resident meeting before we'll approve that extension. And also, we're going to try to do as much as possible with all this stuff, now that we have what we consider a pretty robust and a well-designed resource desk, that will push things through the resource desk. So you'll do your extension through the resource desk, and after I finish these preliminaries, that's one of the things, Robert, would give you a quick reminder of how you ask for an extension through the resource desk. Go ahead, Robert, you go to the next slide. Okay, so here's just the resident meetings again. We really want to make sure there's regular communication with residents throughout. Most PHAs do this. They do, in fact, way more than what we require, but the minimums are 2 before you have an application, 2 before you have a financing plan, which is 1 before the concept call, which we'll get to in a minute, and 1 between concept call and financing plan, and then this additional meeting if there's an extension for more than 6 months. Okay, Robert. Okay, so a concept call. So there's little in RAD that we've really invented from whatever thin air. We've borrowed liberally from other programs, and this is something we've borrowed from FHA production, which is in FHA when you have a lender is requesting FHA insurance, that before a lender can actually submit an application, they ask for a concept call, and they go over their deal and their transaction with the FHA production staff, and there's a few minimal amount of materials that you submit for that call, enough to at least apprise and make the FHA production staff aware of sort of the guts of the transaction. So we're going to do the same thing with RAD, and we're going to, usually we would expect 30 or 60 days out being prior to when you're supposed to submit the financing plan. Then the PHA should be contacting the resource desk. Again, Robert in a minute will show you how that's done. We'll be contacting the resource desk and requesting a concept call. And then once that request comes in, then we internally will assign it to a branch, and the branch chief will assign it to a transaction manager, and that transaction manager will then organize the concept call. And they'll reach out back to the PHA, set up the call, invite the local PIH office. If it's going PBRA, invite the asset management office. And if it's also an FHA loan, also reach out to FHA to see if they'd like to be on the call. So the concept call, again, roughly 30 to 60 days before your financing plan is due. And prior to having the call, you'll have to give us a few materials. We'll go over those materials in a minute. We've built out something on the resource desk that where you fill out, yep, I've submitted this, and those items that are required to have a concept call, if they are not submitted through the resource desk will give you an error flag and say, you can't request a concept call now until all the items are complete. And again, we'll go over those in just a minute. So so you'll have the concept call. You'll sort of go over your deal with your transaction manager. After the call, you will be, if everything is fine, you'll be invited by the transaction manager to then finally submit your financing plan. And the transaction manager may send you, say, yes, you can submit a financing plan, but here are some notes or instructions or some additional guidance for you when you submit the financing plan. Or it could be that the transaction manager says, this is really not ready for prime time. There's still a lot of missing pieces to this transaction. Go back and correct 1, 2, or 3, and then ask for a new concept call once you complete the other items, because you're really not ready to submit a financing plan. And so people will say, well, Greg, recap, why are you doing this? Why are you introducing this concept call? What we want to do is we want to get to a point where the financing plans that come in are more solid than they've been prior. That we really want to get financing plans that are approvable, and so we're going a little bit upstream here to see if we can shake things loose a little bit and lead to stronger financing plans. We'll also, because one of the items that you'll give us will also be, if it's a PBRA transaction, you'll give us the environmental report. It's the one item that will also allow us to begin to start working on that, so that by the time you submit the financing plan, then we're well along into sort of reviewing your environmental review, and it won't hold up the transaction. The resource desk will be sending PHAs reminders if you have a financing plan due date in, let's say, December, and we're in October now. It would be starting to send you the first reminder that, hey, we're 60 days out. We haven't received a request for a concept call yet. And so expect that you'll get that email. And then 30 days later, 30 days before the financing plan due date, there'll be a second reminder to the PHA saying, hey, you've got a financing plan due in December. We haven't heard from you yet. If we don't hear from you after the first email and then the second automated email, we're actually going to have someone in our headquarters office pick up the phone and try to get on the phone personally with someone from the PHA and say, hey, we haven't gotten your attention yet. What's going on? And hopefully we finally get to someone and they say, oh my gosh, someone was sick and we're really sorry. We really are still want to close this deal, and we need another 30-day extension. And so we say, okay, fine. But if it turns out that the PHA seems to have lost interest, then we'll proceed to just revoke the CHAP. But everyone should get plenty of warning, because you'll get these automated emails. And again, an appropriate response for any PHA after getting either the first or the second email is, I'm working on my transaction. Something's happened. I need another 30, 60, 90, 120-day extension. That's fine. Just tell us that, and then we'll extend your transaction. No problem. Just make sure you communicate with us. And when will we begin this? We will begin this starting next week. That all financing plans do from next week onward. We will require a concept call before the financing plan can be submitted. So chances are then we're going to get a bunch of calls this week or whatever asking for it, and we're ready to start handling that. So, okay, Robert, next slide. The other sort of part about the change in transaction processing with the new notice and how we can be more effective to you and also be more efficient is we're changing a little bit about the services, the support services we've provided along with your CHAP. So normally PHAs get assigned what is called today a readiness transaction manager, and that person stays with you through the end of when you submit your financing plan, and then it's taken over by the financing plan transaction manager. We have a support contract with Enterprise Community Partners, who does a lot of our enterprise work, or excuse me, our readiness work today. Although we have our in-house staff that also does some readiness work, but much of it is done by Enterprise. And so here's what's going to change with that. So that once you get a CHAP, we're going to assign you an initial, what we call TA provider, someone from Enterprise, and it's going to be assigned to each new PHA, and this provider will, whoever Enterprise assigns to this PHA, will coordinate the initial kickoff call, just like they do today. And then they're going to provide transactional support for the first 4 months following the CHAP, and we're going to begin that immediately. So any CHAPs that get awarded today, tomorrow, whatever, will start on this new path. So every PHA will first get someone from Enterprise assigned to them as soon as they get a CHAP, and Enterprise will work with them over a period of 4 months to essentially launch them, to get them well down the path to towards submitting a successful financing plan. And the three main things that we really are looking for in this initial 4-month period is, do you know the basics of the program? Right? Do you understand what's required of you under RAD now that you have a CHAP? Do you understand the resource desk? Because you're going to have to be using it to communicate with us and for us to communicate with you. So we want to get you trained on the resource desk. And the third is, do you have a good concept for your deal? That are you doing the right thing? Because we don't want you to go off the rails, 6 months, 9 months down. We want someone to be talking to you about what you're doing to make sure that that's a smart and that's the appropriate choice that you'd be doing, and not to come down 9 months later and realize that you have, for example, a transfer of assistance proposal that's not going to be approved. And so you wasted all this time sort of going down a certain path, and it's not going to work. So you will, every PHA, every awardee will still have a TA assignment through Enterprise, but we want to get you ramped up over the first 4-month period. And the only exception to this is that the Office of Recap, internally today, we tend to handle the largest PHAs in terms of ongoing coordination. We tend to have a monthly meeting with the largest Chicagos and New York Cities and El Pasos and whatnot, the ones that have the largest number of awards, because they've got so many things going on that it's helpful for us to understand the sequencing, the timing, so that we can sort of appropriately work with them. And so therefore, for those larger agencies, we will continue to do that role in-house and continue to have monthly coordination meetings. But for everybody else, they'll fall into this sort of model that I just described for this first 4-month period. So then the question is, well, Greg, what happens after 4 months? Are you just, kicking us out or what? So we'll go to the next slide. Robert. Here we go. Okay. So then after the initial TA period, then all PHAs can ask for technical assistance. So again, we have this contract. This contract technical assistance helps us, with the initial launch of PHAs, but it's also available sort of more long-term for PHAs. And it's not an unlimited pot of funds, so we have to be sort of careful how we use it and stuff. But after the initial period, rather than having someone from Enterprise calling you every month as a PHA and saying, hey, how's your transaction going? Have you done your PCNA report? Have you, what happened with your CHAP amendment? Other things like that. After the first 4-month period, then we hope that you are sort of, the program well enough by now. You can sort of be on your own but you might still need some help, and we certainly acknowledge that. So therein, PHA after the 4-month period can ask for more formally technical assistance, and that you'll essentially write a ticket, right, like a work ticket. Again, Robert in a moment will go through that module in the resource desk, where you say, I need either a specific piece of help, like could someone help me look at this physical needs assessment and give me a second eye on it, because it's what the assessor has done is confusing to me. Or it can be specific like that, or it could be, I need help in 3 different areas. I don't understand the relocation requirement for a transfer of assistance, and but I've also got a lender who's been talking to me about a balloon, and I hear that you can't do a balloon, so can you help me understand what that is? So you'll put it on a in the resource desk. You'll list whatever the items are, and you'll create what is called a TA card in the resource desk, and then it will all be sort of processed up. Actually, ultimately to me, we'll review it and we'll pass it back over to Enterprise and say, here's a ticket for Cambridge, Massachusetts Housing Authority. They're looking for help on X, Y, and Z, and then you'll get a communication from the TA provider saying, you asked for this, now let's talk about what your needs are and try to solve it. And then if Enterprise with its TA provider can solve that problem, then they close out the ticket and the PHA creates a new ticket. If it takes 2 or 3 months to get the issue solved because it's something that has longer lead time, that's fine. You keep it open. And but the PHA, every PHA gets to have 1 open ticket at any one time. Okay, Robert. Go to the next one.
Yep. So it's time for me now.
Okay, so time for you. So Robert's going to now go to the resource desk. We're going to leave the PowerPoint, and we're going to show how we've built these different things that we've talked about into the resource desk. Go ahead, Robert.
Yep, so I've got, before we jump to that, I've got a question that I was going to, Stephen Kessner's asked a question, or raised his hands here, so I'm going to unmute. And Stephen, you're online. What's your question? Stephen, you there? Stephen. All right.
Come back to him then.
Well,
yeah.
Stephen, I'll come back to you after. I'm going to lower your hand, and if you get yourself back unmuted, we'll deal with that, and I'll call on you. So, but as Greg mentioned, we made a few changes to the resource desk, and hopefully all of you are familiar with the resource desk since all of you have current CHAPs, and you are familiar with the landing page, which I've just pulled up here. Again, I'd like to thank my friend Meredith Day in Durham, North Carolina, who has continuously allowed me to use her as our example PHA. So we're looking at the Durham portfolio, and you'll see that nothing's really changed at this point in time. You should all be familiar with this screen. We've got our notifications card up here that if I need to see something that has been done for me recently, it'll show up here. If I've closed some transactions and I want to look those up, I can look at those here. And more importantly, what we're talking about today, active transactions. And so I'm going to be looking at some active transactions that Meredith is running through. So just like you've been doing before, you'll click on the name of the transaction. Here I'm going to look at Forest Hill. And instead of coming up with a readiness checklist and a readiness card, we've created a new interface, which is the concept call checklist. The top card hasn't changed too much, but you'll notice here a big change. So Greg mentioned in his part of his presentation that we would be telling you through the resource desk what documents and things needed to be done in order for you to be able to schedule a concept call. And you'll also note that I can't push the concept call button because I haven't done these things. So we've got the red warning, and it's giving me a list of things that have to be done prior to submission of my request for a concept call. I have to, as a PHA, I have to upload my conversion overview. I have to upload the CNA. I have to upload my environmental review. If there's a change in occupancy, I'm going to need to get that done. If this is new construction, so if I were to go down here to the checklist and change this to be new construction, you'll note that I now have to get my site neighborhoods done, okay? And I also have to complete the transaction log. So all of these things, all of you should be familiar with where they're located. So the transaction log is easy. It's off my transaction pages. I drop in here. I have to complete the beginning of the transaction log. So I have to put in my pro forma and my initial sources and uses. We understand that this is going to change as you're moving through this, and it changes once you submit your financing plan. But in order to have the concept call, RECAP's desires to have at least an initial look at what your operating pro forma is, what your sources and uses are. You should have a sense of what's going on if you're that close to submitting your financing plan. So the transaction log is going to need to be completed. Similarly, for the financing plans places, you're going to go to the financing plan documents. And again, this should not be something new to anyone. You should all be familiar with this. None of this is changing. All of the requirements are staying the same. You're still putting them in the same place. But what we now have done is we've now tied these document uploads to that first page. So as soon as I upload the conversion overview, that will come off of my list under the concept call checklist. Okay, I'm going to show you one in a minute that I've done some work on, but I want to kind of finish walking through this. A couple of other things that we have done, we've tied some of these checkboxes to the concept call checklist. This checklist is what you, as the PHA, need to be completing. In the past, you could see what the readiness transactions managers were completing to talk through with you, but this one is actually done by you. There'll be nobody at HUD doing this for you. No TA providers will be doing this for you. You, the PHA, are responsible for going through and answering all of these questions and doing what each one says. We're hopeful that the interactive nature of this card will make it relatively easy for you to push things through. So you'll notice that in checking yes here for new construction, I'm being told you cannot submit your financing plan until the site neighborhood's review has been completed or approved. Okay, so we've got to get that, you've got to get that uploaded and then generally approved prior to financing plan submission. Okay, there are some cases where you can submit beforehand, but that's typically what RECAP wants. If you were to answer no to this, then that red warning is going to go away and the site neighborhoods requirement is going to go away. And all of these questions, not all of them, but most of these questions have other questions embedded after them. For example, the unit reduction. If you're going to reduce the number of units at the property or through this transaction, are you using de minimis? Okay? If you're not using de minimis, then you need to let us know. Okay? So this will be something new to everyone. So we know you're going to be kind of bouncing through it. We're hoping it's intuitive enough, but again, as Greg mentioned, the resource desk is here for you to ask questions of, and hopefully during your initial kickoff and launch with your initial TA provider, they'll be walking through this with you. So that's one that's brand new that just started working through. Let's take a look at one that I've done all the uploads for. So in this particular case, I have uploaded, you notice at the top, I've uploaded all the documents. The only thing that's left here is completing the concept call checklist. So I've gone through and I've answered all of the various questions, but I haven't quite finished. So let's do that now. Are there any known environmental concerns? Well, let's just say that there are some. If there are some, I need to explain that. We're not asking you to have solved them yet. We're just asking you to explain them to us as to what's going on. So I've got some UCB issues. Okay, so that's an explanation. I filled that in. Am I subject to a voluntary compliance agreement, etc.? In this case, no. This should be very rare. Most PHAs should not be subject to this. To the extent that you are, again, there's going to be a comment box that you're going to have to explain and talk to about. And then the TM that gets assigned to this will then work with the PIH field staff to understand more about it and make sure everyone's in compliance. So once I've answered those questions and I update the checklist, now you'll see that I can schedule my concept call. So once I schedule my concept call, you'll see the date that the request was made. So I just did it today. There was an email that was generated that went out to the RECAP branch chiefs and Greg, who will then decide which branch will take it, and then that branch chief will then assign it to a transaction manager, and that transaction manager, as Greg mentioned, will do the scheduling of the concept call itself. They'll do the invitation. They'll reach out to you. There's nothing else for you to do as a PHA once you've pushed that button. Everything's going to be automated for you behind the scenes. Okay? So that's kind of the concept call change. We're hoping that this is going to lead to better financing plan submissions, more targeted conversations with the HUD transaction managers, so that nobody's surprised when the financing plan comes in and there are lots of questions and you have to kick the financing transaction managers having to kick them back. This is hopefully going to stop all that, and you as a PHA will get better customer service. That's the goal. So that's the main change on the resource desk, is adding this concept call. But there are a number of others that Greg alluded to. And so what we've done to make that easy for everybody is on the action items, so across my menu here, we've added a few action items. The new application has been there for a while. Most of you PHAs, at least all the new ones, have applied through the resource desk and used this feature already. If you are a portfolio awardee or have a larger inventory and have other AMPs that are coming in, you as a PHA will be using that to create new applications. So that's not new. Interestingly enough, the financing plan extension piece is not new. This was embedded when we rolled the new resource desk out. It just so happens that some PHAs used it and others didn't. Now, PHAs will have to use it. In the past, they could go through the readiness transaction managers, they could email the resource desk. There were different ways to kind of get the financing plan extension taken care of. Now, PHAs are in control of this, and so when they want to extend the financing plan, they'll simply click on this button here, and it will take them to a new card. And as Greg mentioned, it gives a little explanation. So the first thing is to say, okay, my financing plan was due back in August. I really need to get an extension for that. So let's extend that out to the 29th. And the reasoning would be, tax credits. That would be one reason. Or continuing to work with my CNA to find out how I'm going to pay for the work that needs to be done. Or any variety of reasons. And so once you've typed in your explanation and you hit the submit button, you will get confirmation that your extension request has been submitted. That request will have gone into HUD headquarters. There are a couple of people that can approve financing plan extensions. If they have questions, they will get back to you directly and find out if they need to have more information, or they might request a call just to make sure things are really moving forward. Greg mentioned that 6 months, a 6-month extension, anything less than that will be given without the requirement for a resident meeting, any 6-month extension or cumulative 6-month extensions. So if you ask for an extension for 3 months and then you come back at the end of that period of time or a month later and realize that you need more and you ask for an additional 4-month extension, well, in total you've now asked for 6 months or more, so you're going to be asked for the opportunity for you to do a resident meeting and to send in the confirmation that you did do that resident meeting. So that's going to be tied into, again, the resource desk as well. The other piece that we've added through our action items is the ability to request technical assistance. So after the technical assistance, the initial phase is over and you finish the first 4 months and now you're 6 or 7 months in and you've had an extension but you're really getting close, but you're really confused about something, we've created a few categories. You don't have to choose one of these. You can do other assistance, as Greg mentioned. You can do multiple ones in your request, but it would be helpful for us and for RECAP for you to at least try and select one of these, and then in the explanation, if you want more, type in more. If something becomes more regularly, we're getting lots of requests for one thing, we'll create some new categories, but it's just nice to be able to see what initial category you're struggling with. But again, you're going to explain why you need the extension. You're going to confirm that your contact information is correct. So in this case, as I'm using Meredith as my guinea pig, I've used my email information. So I'm going to submit this request. Oops, I have to. That's a good sign. You have to give information for why you're doing this. So let's just go with need help. Now I'm going to submit the request. I get the confirmation that my technical assistance request has gone through. That then goes to Greg, who will do his review of it. He may have questions to come back to you with, or he may forward it along to the TA contractors, who will then reach out to you. If he has questions for you, an email will come back from the resource desk with those questions. If he denies your request, say for whatever reason he feels like the information is on the resource desk, he'll provide that direction, and he'll decline to provide technical assistance. You'll get an email directly from the resource desk telling you what happened. So you'll never have to worry about not knowing what's going on. You'll hear when you've either been accepted for TA or when TA has been rejected. We're trying hard to make sure that everyone's getting noticed. Again, for all of you PHAs that have larger consultants and larger staff with lots of people, you control the notifications. So actually, I'll show you that here. You control, your point of contact controls who gets notified. Okay? So in Meredith's case, if she wants these various folks to be able to be notified for any requests that go out, she simply has to go here and make that statement here, and she can let them be notified for various information. So that's something that you all will be very familiar with as you're getting through administering your resource desk work. The last piece that we wanted to show you was CHAP amendments. So this is something that's brand new for PHAs. You've never had to request CHAP amendments through the resource desk. You've always gone through your transaction managers, or if you were in closing, through the closing coordinators. So up into financing plan submission, you will now control the CHAP amendment requests. Once the financing plan has been submitted and you're working with the financing transaction manager, or you're in closing, those processes will remain the same. If you need a CHAP amendment after the financing plan has been submitted, or when you're in closing, the closing coordinators and the financing TMs will still take care of that for you. But prior to that point, you will click on the request CHAP amendment, and then you will go through and explain why you're asking for the CHAP amendment. And then if there's a document that you have to upload, you'll upload that here. There is a CHAP amendment guide that's on the resource desk that walks through this. Some of you out there may be asking, well, what sort of documents might I need to upload here? Well, for example, if you're taking advantage of the tenant utility allowance savings rent boost, then you would need to upload the independent third-party energy audit that was done that analyzed the current utilities versus the as-improved utilities and came up with the utility savings that you're then going to be getting 75% of in your CHAP amendment request. So that would be an example of what you might want to upload there. If you've got a very complicated CHAP amendment that you're doing and you've got a spreadsheet that you put together, you would upload that here. Again, this is going to go to the resource desk. If the resource desk has questions, the resource desk will reach out directly to you. Just for those of you who are aware, the resource desk has always processed CHAP amendments. It's just how the information has gotten to us in the past, again, through transaction managers and through the closing coordinators. But this will be a direct link for you all as PHAs to get to the CHAP amendment process. So those are the kind of the major pieces of the new resource desk, of the new concept call and all the various action items. And I see that I've got some questions here for us. So the first question is the RAD resource desk guide being updated to reflect these changes? And that is a great question, and that is in fact happening. So yes, so that will be the resource desk going to be updated to include this information for PHAs. Stephen, you said you've been taken care of, so that's good. The next question we have is Rev 4 says that if you have a CHAP and you wish to pursue Section 18, you must request for your CHAP to be suspended. Is there a way to do that on the resource desk? So there's never been, and there's no way to really suspend the CHAP. What we're going to do to implement this is just provide any necessary extensions or that sort of thing. But typically, when you're pursuing Section 18, that's a finite period of time, and typically that's solved before the financing plan would be due. And in this case, the financing plan due date comes along, then the extension request that you would ask for, the reason you'd be asking is, I have a Section 18 application in, and I need my CHAP to stay out there until that's approved or disproved. So that's how that is taken care of. And those were the first questions that I have, and nobody's hands are raised.
Hey, Rob,
go ahead, Greg.
Here in the room here, one of the questions we had was for the transaction manager, when someone requests the concept call and you have the checklist, will the transaction manager see that checklist?
Absolutely. Yep. Yes. The concept call, so just like the readiness transaction manager and the readiness checklist, the financing TM will see this, and this will be their kind of starting point for their conversation with the PHA. So absolutely, this is available to the transaction managers.
And also just to, again, stress to everybody that the concept call, we're not trying to underwrite the deal at this time.
Right.
I just really want to get a sense of, are you on the right path? Are things pretty much together? And does we have a reasonable assurance that by the time in the next 30 days, when you're about to submit, when you submit, that this is going to be a complete application? That's really the things that we're looking for with the concept call.
That's exactly right, and that's a very good point to reiterate to both the HUD staff as well as the PHAs out there, is that, for example, the CNA is required to be submitted, but the financing plan transaction manager is not going to review the CNA prior to the concept call. They may look at the summary, but they're not going to get into the nitty-gritty. There may very well be issues. They may come back and want changes and things like that, but they want to make sure that at least what has been submitted is being covered in the concept call. Yep. So we've got another question. Can you explain the open ticket for TA? Sure. So if TA is requested, so typically the TA is going to be requested for a specific issue. I'm having trouble with my CNAE tool, or I've got some environmental concerns and I need to talk to somebody about the phase 1 that I'm reviewing. So that will be the kind of the main reason why I've requested TA. But then in the box, I'm going to explain that and anything else that I'm struggling with that I may need assistance with. So then let's say that the TA is then granted and you have your TA contractor gets on the phone with you to start walking through your issues, and during that conversation, other things come up. Those can certainly be handled by this same TA provider and by in the same quote unquote ticket. There is a finite period of time for which the ticket is good, and the TA contractors know that, and they will be managing around that. And to the extent more TA is needed, then they may say to the PHA, okay, we finished this first round, we're going to close this out, and I need you to go in and request a second round of TA. Or they may say, yep, we're all set, and walk away, and 2 days later, the PHA say, oh my gosh, I've got another question then you'll need to start up another TA request. So that's generally how that's going to work. Greg, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, just to say, you know what, with the TA we have, we can never be anyone's development consultant. That role really, PHA needs a consultant, they need to go get one. But this is targeted technical assistance, sort of spot where you're maybe stuck on something, and we have some resources and the talent to help you get unstuck. But it's usually case-specific, targeted, and we want to be in and out. So these are sort of the things that you would have been asking the readiness transaction manager under the previous mode of operation, issues that would come up during your monthly calls or something like that. But yeah, that's good.
So we've got a couple of questions about new notice requirements and when things are applicable. For example, the radon, the HEROES entries, the extra tenant meetings, and the things that we've been talking about today, when those are effective. And so, Greg, do you want to touch on kind of how this is, what the
everything, essentially all that is effective. I mean, the concept call effective beginning next Monday. This month of October is the last month for any PHA that has a CHAP that's more than 4 months old, for which you'll have a readiness transaction manager. This will be your last month calls with your readiness transaction manager. So take the greatest advantage of that last month, and then starting in November, the TA card will begin. And you don't have to wait till November to submit your TA request. You can do it immediately. So essentially, all this stuff is now happening now. HEROES with all financing plans that get submitted for PBRA from this point forward should be through the HEROES system. The resident meetings effective immediately for any new applications, but also for any financing plan extensions more than 6 months. And
also for the concept call, after the concept call, before financing plan submission.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep, that's right. So all those items are effective immediately. So yes, great question. So thanks for asking. Looks like I have a hand raised as well. Terrell, you're on the air with us. Terrell Bates?
Oh, yeah, that's me. Okay, I'm sorry. So
Okay.
I just became aware of this call about an hour ago from my first transaction call. Is there a way that I can log on to something so that I am aware when this type of information is being provided?
What, you're talking about this call, generally this call?
Yes.
Yeah, so by being on the resource desk, that's how you got the invitation. So that's the way you would get the invitation. You have a CHAP now?
Yeah, but actually I didn't get the invitation. I just had my call at 1 o'clock with the RAD transaction manager, and she sent me the link to it.
Okay. Well,
I think it's sort of how can she get access to the first part of the call? We're posting this.
oh yeah, absolutely. Yes, sure, absolutely. Yes, we will get that to you. But I'm going to look and see. I just wrote down your information, and I'll see why you didn't get this email. Because if you have an active CHAP, you should have gotten this. You should have gotten the email.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, Greg. That's all the questions and hand raises we've got. Anything else you want to cover?
Let's just go to those last two pages, I think, on the PowerPoint, and then I think we're done.
Yep. Absolutely.
If there's anything we didn't cover yet. So, go on to the landing pages, and
Hold on, let me get there just a second. There we go.
okay, other changes. So, just reminding people, this is from Will's presentation, the utility consumption baseline no longer part of it. For 9% or new construction properties or properties that have been recently constructed in the last 5 years, we're giving you this sort of new option that if you don't want to do the e-tool to size the R for R, if you don't want to go through that exercise, you can simply just agree to putting aside $450 per unit per year as an ADRR, and we'll exempt you from the reserve analysis. Of course, you could still try to, if you think that number is too high, then you don't have to do this, and you could just complete an e-tool, and if it's amounts lower, then certainly you can use that. Okay, next slide. We talked about all Part 50 reviews submitted through HEROES. We've also, as part of the Part 50s, we've sort of done this streamlined sort of environmental submissions for when there's no work that's being done, and so the notice sort of talks about that. And radon testing is also now required, whether it's a Part 50 or a Part 58, and we're going to be reissuing very shortly the RAD Environmental Review Quick Reference Guide, hopefully in the next week or so, that will include more language about the HEROES and the radon and the associated requirements for that. Robert, anything else?
That's it.
Okay. You want to just check to see if anybody else has raised their hand, and if not, we'll shut it down.
Sure. We don't have anything else, but one thing I will stress here at the end is if you do have questions, and as questions come up, as we know they will, please reach out to the resource desk. I think most of you already know how to do that and have done that in the past, and we look forward to continue to work with everybody. We don't think this is going to be that big of a change for folks, but we do think that from a recap and HUD perspective, it's going to make things look more smoothly for them and hopefully better submissions by you all, the PHAs.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Robert. And we look forward to continuing to work with all our awardees. Thanks.
Thanks.